Okay. Welcome, NACAA. We're going to turn our program today for our webinar 365 over to Miss Jenny, and she's going to introduce our topic and our guest for today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I know that a lot of you are very interested in being able to write a proposal for a presentation, and you want it to be so perfect. And sometimes you might miss something, sometimes you might not have it quite right. So today is a wonderful opportunity to find out just how wonderful it can be made. And we have um, Heather is going to be our person who's going to talk about it, and Andy West is also part of the horticulture team, as I am. So enjoy.
All right, thanks, Jenny. I'll go ahead here and get my slides pulled up to share. Okay, are you guys seeing the larger slide? We're good there? All right, Tyrone's giving me a thumbs up. So again, on behalf of the Horticulture and Turf Crafts Committee for NACAA, it's a pleasure to be sharing with you from roots to results, and we're going to discuss how to write a winning horticulture abstract. Introducing the team, Ginny mentioned who we are, but you'll see those contact informations here as we move towards the end. So here's kind of what the plan has been. We kicked off a similar presentation last year. I'm just kind of helping folks understand how these things get evaluated, and also to look at different ways that you can begin writing that abstract. And make sure that it meets the guidelines so that you can get the maximum amount of points and be selected to share. So the plan today is really to take a look at, review, and break down. We have a new standardized rubric coming out from Program Development Council. I have a couple of examples to share. Andy also had some examples to share, but he can't access his. So we'll look for his input as well. And I know that Jenny, having been involved in the organization as long, also has examples and then tips and tricks that we can share. And then we want to answer your questions. So feel free to post those in the chat or raise your hand, unmute. We'll do our best to accommodate. I'm pretty much an informal presenter, so I don't want you to get lost in necessarily my rhyme or reason in terms of presenting. But if there's a question that relates to a slide, feel free to raise your hand, unmute, or throw something in the chat. I have it up, so I'm trying to pay attention, and Ginny and Andy, I know, will also peel that. So that's kind of where we're going to move through today. And so updated uniform scoring rubric. Whenever we start to think about submitting these things, right, it's always important to know where you're headed. And so basically the new rubric has roughly three parts: style and formatting, abstract content, that's the meat of it, right? So either we're writing an abstract for education or we're writing a research abstract. And then we have, applicability, replication, and interest or need. So three kind of core parts to that. You can see how those points are divvied out there. And in the December issue of the County Agent magazine, you'll see I included an image of the page just so that you could see what that looks like there. And then to remind you all, it's a minimum of 150 words and a 350 word maximum. So very important to be able to use your word count and use those words wisely. Get as close. When they upped it from 250 to 350, take that opportunity, right, to really give us a good solid abstract so that we know what we're looking at. So those are kind of the basics from the rubric itself. And then I broke it out into just kind of how I see it, how our committee sort of evaluates that, where these fall within those three kind of core columns. And so when we talk about style and formatting, we're really looking at what's the format. So, does it follow the sample format that's been given? Are we using correct grammar and punctuation? And then you can see the points possible. the meat of the abstract is definitely the abstract content. And so here we're looking at, the abstract itself. So the statement of the issue or those needs, right, that we're going to be addressing. How did we accomplish the project or complete it? So the methodologies, the impact and results, and did those lead to action? And then this is maybe an area that seems somewhat new, right, in the rubric, but just giving guidance for educational, so extension education as a presentation or a poster versus research. So in the extension education realm, right, we're looking at, how did we demonstrate, or how well does this demonstrate how we use that information? How did we deliver that information? How did it come to, right, our target audience? And then research, right? So we're looking more at data and results of the research. Sometimes that's in a visual format with charts and graphs. There are many forms to display that, but letting us know then the conclusion and the application of that research. And we'll talk a little bit in more detail about each of these. And then that last component is topic and interest level. I refer to that as applicability, replication, and interest or need. So again, is this an interest? Does this abstract represent an issue that's of interest to industry, clientele, public, producers, whatever target audience we're looking at? And is it applicable? So if I'm providing this, is this something that can be utilized in other regions across NACAA? So quick, down and dirty. Now, as we think about that's a lot of information, right, to kind of do. And if you haven't maybe had experience in writing abstracts and you're not sure where to begin, this is kind of my quick little easy checklist for creating a draft abstract using the rubric. So, don't stress. Keep it simple. Deconstruct the rubric. So break it down, and you'll see that. Answer questions that are asked of you in short sentences or bullet points, and then use those to connect the dots, right? That's going to form the framework of how you write your draft, and then review it. So it's really a simple way, at least in my mind, when I'm writing abstracts for various conferences, is to break down the rubric. Like, what am I being evaluated on? How am I being managed in terms of presenting that information? And so what are those formatting requirements that I need to be aware of? So this is the break it down section. As I said, finding that succinct, creative, accurate title that describes the program that you want to offer or the research you want to present. And so, we have some really cool tools now that can help us a little bit with that, right? In terms of what we're able to do. So coming up with, a title that is, that demonstrates the content, right, of our abstract. That statement of issue or need, I think we're all familiar with that. Is it emerging? Is it timely? Does it demonstrate relevancy, right? And, to our clientele, whether that be professional, community, right, industry program, that's being addressed. It's always good to clearly state, break out, and think about what those purpose, the objectives, the hypothesis of your research is. If there were program learning or evaluation objectives, this is an opportunity, right, to include those as part of that abstract. And then your target audience. So who are we looking at? Why is this information going to prove relevant, for your educational program, or who's going to use those research results, right? Also, materials and methodology, as we said, this is kind of the meat of that abstract, right? Including how you did something, what tools did you use, what procedures did you use to complete the project in a simple format that kind of captures a nice summary of how that should happen. And so if we continue to break it down, really, we look then into like outputs. And so this is very logic model centered in terms of looking at that, but having this information allows you to have that information available then as you write your abstract. And so thinking about how you're going to report those results. So what findings did you have with your research? If you weren't able to, if your findings hadn't come to a close, or you're still collecting or operating the research at the time of submission, maybe by the time you present, at the conference, that research is going to be available, or those results will be available. Don't be afraid to share that, just let us know that it's currently ongoing, right? And results will be available by a certain date. From an educational perspective, I think sharing the activities that you've done, if you use specific materials or resources to support that program or project, what was the outreach, how many participants, and how did you disseminate or use that information to educate that target audience, clientele, or the public. And so making sure that you understand that while the same items are required in each, it's just the way that we phrase that, or the words that we use, right, to describe being able to do that. And so then answering those questions about impact, and I think this is always a challenge for anyone as we look at this, but not only just looking at the results of research or a program, right? But what did it lead to any type of actionable behaviors, or did it provide a broader application or reference an additional related extension or outreach program or public work, that was able to benefit as a result of that? So thinking about the bigger picture there. And so if there were evaluation methods used, this is the time to share them, identify some key statements that were obtained. And so it could be, a demonstrated change in knowledge of attending the program. It could be, a savings either for a family or a producer or a grower, or even a commercial industry in terms of, research sometimes to make that production decision. And then, or did, participants assign a certain monetary value, right, for the knowledge that was gained as their participation? So something that that impact comes from those change in behaviors, right? And so as we look through some of the models that we have for that, being able to measure that impact comes from our evaluation strategy. So being able to wrap that into that abstract is very important. And then, make sure that we are writing or thinking about how the program or project gets implemented or replicated in other regions, and tying that to that statement of need, and showing that it's maybe a broader issue through 2 or 3 regions of our NACAA family, right, that's attending, or it's something that's an industry-wide topic, a challenge that's being faced there. It's fine if it's local clientele. Sometimes we can draw conclusions from that, and we may be experiencing similar things, as we kind of zoom that lens in, we can see some of these connections that are there. So breaking it down, and then using that style and formatting as a review mechanism. So again, when we're writing, that could be grammar. We have grammar and punctuation, we know from that requirement there. But page 11 of the County Agent Magazine actually shows you the sample format. So it should be 1 paragraph that you're looking at. And a lot of times the format that we have to submit that also formats our abstract, but making sure that in that larger section where we're actually adding the abstract content that we've compiled, it's always best to do this, I recommend, in like a Word document, and then paste it into that piece so that you can meet those sample formatting guidelines. So that means, following the word count, 150 word minimum, 350 word maximum. To be able to do that. And then some additional style comments are to really think about the ABCs. This was given to me by a much more tenured faculty educator many years ago, and I've used it in many things that I do, but especially when I'm focused on doing presentations or writing abstracts regarding posters or presentations for national conferences or any type, which is ABC: accuracy, brevity, clarity. And then also put into mindset the following considerations when we're writing. And so these were guidelines that were also shared with me from our learning and organizational development piece, to talk about the who, what, when, where, why, and how, the so what approach. So the so what is really the impact, like why are we doing this? What's relevant about it? Specific words, phrases, concepts, and keywords that if you've written, maybe you've written a paper or you use something different, right? But typically an abstract is a summary. If you're writing a paper, right, we tend to use that. So this is really about using those keywords to kind of set the tone and drive the message so that when you do come to do your presentation, you'll have that intact. Precise, clear, descriptive language. Again, it should be kind of that objective rather than evaluative point of view. You should be concise, again, the ABCs, but we need complete sentences. So there's still grammatically, important pieces that we should follow. Plain language, even though it is an extension focus, try not to use jargon. Jargon sometimes changes between regions. And so if we do have acronyms, make sure that we're spelling those out. If we can't avoid them, it's always good to, but sometimes we need to spell that out. I have always been instructed to write in the third person. So I or we is typically not something that we would do. And then use verbs that are in the active voice. So we want to show action. We want to show impact along those lines. So those are just some writing style pieces that I think are important to incorporate as you're reviewing the document. Okay, I'll stop here for a minute. Any questions? That's just really a quick overview with some quick tips, an overview of the updated rubric. Anyone have questions or comments, other tips or tricks that you might have encountered? Feel free to unmute or share those in the chat. I'll give you all a few minutes here. Okay. I know that was quick, but feel free, like I said, again, if we're moving through, this is an example last year of a hort and turfgrass presentation abstract that was submitted to the committee. This was an accepted presentation. I did take the liberty of kind of adding some highlighted areas because I wanted you to kind of see how this particular submission maybe met the criteria. And so this was an extension education presentation. And so 3 main categories here. And when I look at this, I'm thinking of blue is kind of that, the first part of the abstract content. So that's where we're talking about like, what is that established need, right? So we're taking a look at stating that here. And so if you take just a couple minutes to kind of read what's highlighted in blue, you'll see how they introduced kind of the need. So high interest, right, among the residential community, producing sustainable urban vegetable gardens, and connecting harvest directly to healthier home-cooked meals. Notice that they also mentioned that there was an economically motivated desire to grow food at home in order to achieve a cost savings and to also counter periodic food shortages. So they're giving you an idea, they're setting the stage, right? The workshop title was created and it tells you where and who and kind of what their background was, right? So it's identifying that target audience. And then it gave you the purpose or the objective of the workshop, right? Focus on best seasonal gardening practices, understanding Florida-friendly landscaping, principle number 1, right plant, right place. And then it goes on to describe those. So that was kind of like a succinct description of the overall project, right? The need and identifying the target audience, objectives, and purpose. And then we got into green. So if you look at the green section, that's really talking about the methodology, right? So they gave you the dates and we looked, this was over basically a 4-year period. Partnership between horticulture and FCS, Family Consumer Sciences educators or agents. 3-part workshop series, each fall and spring, talks about the class design and how it was delivered, and then what participants received, to be able to do that. So again, short and sweet, but here's what we did, here's how we did it, here's the types of methods or curriculum that was utilized. And then lastly, we kind of move into that results and impact, right? That yellow section, 351 participants, 15 workshops, how many responded to a post-program survey, the response rate, what did we learn from that? We learned about the knowledge gained. We learned about their intent, right, for utilizing the knowledge gained, what they plan to do with that, information and how they plan to implement it moving forward. And so that was done in about 290 words. Could they have maybe used more? You bet. They still had 60 words to go. So use it to the best of your advantage, but nonetheless, it's a good example of having the majority of the parts in place. Any questions about this example? Andy, Ginny, guys have any comments, thoughts?
I thought that it was well put together. I mean, the way they began, it was really, you got the idea of what was going on and why they were doing it. I thought it was great.
Andy?
Yeah, I do something similar with the color coding as I'm reviewing them because it makes it easier when I go back to score them. Okay, this is the parts that I'm scoring, and that way it's a whole lot easier than trying to remember or trying to find things as you're moving through the abstract. If you state it out and make it easy where we can just come in and highlight, okay, this is this part, this is this part, it makes it a lot easier when we get to that scoring process.
And I think that that's why when I'm framing or when I thought about breaking that abstract down and I'm offering this, or we talk about this as a group when we were designing like our original or talked about how we evaluated these was to break it down into these categories, right? It was easier to kind of find that information. And so if it flows, it makes it really easy for, that review standpoint, we're able to, find those pieces and parts. Okay. Any questions from the group?
I'd like to make another comment about the fact that you're right. They could have really gone ahead and added more to it. They had the extra word count that they could have gone ahead and just made it even more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Take advantage of those 350 words. Okay, the next example I pulled was actually a research example from 2024 that I thought also had some pretty good things. Again, I highlighted it. Now, just remember with research, right? We're presenting, so we sort of have like a built-in, I think, system, which is maybe a little, between the logic model and the scientific method. We're kind of caught between those two. But in this case, if you look here. Now we're looking at an evaluation that was done on systemic spray programs to reduce onion center rot. And this was actually, while there was a lead presenter, it was a group of, I believe, Georgia extension agents and specialists that were engaged in this research project between growers. And so again, the growth of the industry in Georgia, it's become, it is the largest economic driver. So it's indicating, right, the need, right, or demonstrating the importance of this. Notice the estimated, so it's giving us the estimation of like the farm to gate value at 120 million. And it says, that growers face many disease challenges, bacterial and fungal. And so they tell you then why they chose to focus on center rot. Because it's the leading cause of loss that growers experience, right? And they then give you more information about the losses and how they can range and how severe they can be. And so because this is such a viable agronomic and economic industry in Georgia, again, the influence of losses and finding out effective treatments is really a critical management standpoint, right, for these growers. So I think a good summary there is we think about what's necessary in that interest, stating the problem or the hypothesis. I think they've done a great job of kind of giving you enough information to talk about not only the reason that it's important to growers, their target audience, right, but also to the industry as a whole, the Vidalia onion industry in Georgia. Then they go on, right, that green section again, those methodologies. So they tell you how long they collected data, and what they were evaluating. So they're looking at 4 treatment approaches to center rot, and they describe that. They give you the objective of the study that's there, and they tell you then what, kind of within that design, who planted what, the size of the plots, is there a buffer? They talked about natural infection was relied upon. They talked about the treatments, how the backpack sprayer was calibrated to deliver things, and then the applications like were made on the input levels during the growing season, and then when they were obsessed. So it's giving you like all the methodology, right, the step-by-step, the procedures of, right, that scientific research. in that short green section. And a lot of times with research, you will find that that section, the methodology part, is lengthier, right? Usually methodology and results tend to be lengthier in a research abstract than maybe, the introduction. But this one, I think, does a nice job of balancing the three. And then if you look at the yellow again, results and impact. So again, 3-year field assessments. What did they observe? They looked at integrated management practices. Those had an impact on marketable yield. And it talks about the high input treatment revenue, tells you the monetary, cost or value, what it was for an organic treatment piece and a grower. And then on average, what was the increase in, center rot incidents. And it says overall, the high input treatment led to greater revenue returns. So they give you kind of a nice summary of those findings with some detail there. And notice the word count on this one is 333. So they still had, a little under 20 words, maybe 17 to kind of round it out, something like that. Again, comments, Andy, Jenny, anyone else out there? This was just an example. If you're presenting research, this is a good example, I think, of a great way to do it and to use the word count. Questions about the examples, thoughts, comments?
I think from a research point of view, this was probably just the way they wanted to have it. So very, very clean, no additional frills. And maybe they thought that if they had any more words to go ahead and put in, that might have been more, more than they wanted to add.
Sometimes having more words isn't necessary. Sometimes you've described what you need to describe. I always tend to enter more words and then I shave. That's just me. Andy, what about you from the research perspective as a team member?
This one I really liked the way they laid it out, because it gives you the information you need to know to judge it against the rubric. It's really, really good. Enough information to know what's going on.
Okay, participants, any questions, comments, your thoughts?
This is Tyrone, me being a livestock person, I think this is on the 6th grade reading level where I can understand it. I don't know about plants, don't know about onions, but the terminology and the simplicity of it is good for me, being as this research is not over my head.
That's a great point, Tyrone. That's really good. I agree.
And I think sometimes, like you said, Heather, if you start out with more words, it's easier to go ahead and condense than to fill in. Because sometimes you might miss something when you're trying to fill in.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Ginny, I've got a slide here for you. Did you have anything that was there a particular abstract that you can recall or remember anything about it that you really thought stood out? For that, I wanted to give you each an opportunity that we're here today to kind of talk about that.
Thank you. I really, when I look at them, I just dive into it, and I just am so into it. It's really hard for me to think of any of them that have been really poor. So I have to actually read them at least twice so I can go ahead and say, oh, okay, not only this is really well written to me with all the information that I like, but I don't see any problems with it. But other times you look at something and it's just not enough verbiage because you haven't actually described what needs to go. So that's basically what I would say.
Okay. All right. Andy, I know that you had some thoughts because you had worked on some slides yourself, I know, to share. So
Yeah, so I'd put a couple of slides together. I'd essentially done the same thing that has been done with the other ones, where it was highlighted out just to show the parts. I think that's the key, is to make sure that you're addressing each of those areas that we're gonna score you in the rubric, making sure that and then connecting the dots is really the big thing, that it flows from one to the next. So I came in about the time that the new rubric was being put together, and it actually made judging them last year a little more difficult because we had a higher quality of abstracts coming in and making it a little more difficult to judge those abstracts. And so if you follow the rubric, it actually makes it a really good abstract for us to judge.
And I think as our committee, we want to encourage folks to submit those, and to do it in a way that makes it easy to, if it feels overwhelming to you, to kind of sort that out. But if you're looking for a way to kind of be able to write something and get something good and published in that abstract in our NACAA proceedings journals, things like that, then I think that's why our committee is why we offer to do this and have this conversation, is to let you know kind of like how we evaluate them and what we're looking for and how we measure that to the standardized rubric.
And
Okay.
we try to include as many of the really wonderful ones as we can. I mean, I know we have a certain number that we're supposed to keep it, but sometimes we can go ahead and beg a little bit for maybe a little bit more time. So, don't not do it because you think that, oh, everybody is doing it.
Good advice. So these are some simple tips and tricks that we had worked on last year. And so I think it's always good advice to make sure that you read, understand, and follow the guidelines and instructions. So this actually is a snippet from the poster abstract page, which I think also applies to our abstracts in general, but that's where you can find it. And so some standard just instructions for submitting those abstracts to keep in mind. And so these are things that are put out by NACAA. They're in your county agents magazine. They're listed on the website, but make sure that you know what you're supposed to be doing. And so, when all else fails, read the instructions, right? Make sure you're meeting those. I think too, the goal of today was to make you aware of the rubric, right? Become familiar with it. It is newer. Again, use that 350 word limit, but make sure that your words answer the questions and that they're presented in proper grammatic and punctuation fashion. So complete sentences. It's not a bullet type of document or paragraph. We talked about, how we can use questions in those sections to kind of build that draft abstract. And then always, it's a good idea if you're new to this or you've maybe never done it before, seek advice from maybe your state NACAA horticulture chair, or have a peer who is good at, who has done this before or good at doing it. Have them review and proof your rubric for submission, or your abstract against kind of that rubric before you submit it. So give yourself enough time to kind of incorporate those pieces. I'm at questions. I'm happy to entertain any questions, any comments that you have. I will share this. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute. But these are references and resources that we've used to pull together that you can find to help you understand, writing an abstract from some very notable organizations, as well as kind of using the logic model to frame that for you. And I do have a handout. I'm happy to, if you're interested in a copy of the slides or have a handout, I'm happy to share that with you. I put them in a PDF format so that you can get these links. And then these are just links to our submission links for committee contacts. You have the December County Agent Magazine. But again, for posters, presentations, when you have the presentation application, you have to log in using your NACAA account. And then those are our contacts for our committee. That's our current committee at that point. And then if you don't mind, I would really appreciate it. An extension, I wouldn't be a good educator if I didn't ask for feedback. So in presenting today, if you'd be happy to visit the link there on your screen or scan the QR code, you may be asked to enter an access code. So I'll leave this up, but if you have questions, I'd appreciate your feedback and evaluation of my teaching today. that would be great. And thanks to Ginny and Andy for being out there to support me in the wings. I appreciate it. Questions or comments, things that we can answer for you before we end our program for today?
I wanted to ask you, did you want to do a sound bite for a pre-tour or anything coming up in Denver?
Well, we definitely could do that.
Yeah, we have our next webinar coming up.
Yeah, we're going to do the webinar a lot about that, but it's going to be wonderful. I thought it was interesting when I've been talking to people on the East Coast about going to Denver. One person right away said, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Make sure you drink a lot of water. And then somebody else said, keep in mind you're a mile high. It might be a little bit not enough oxygen up there. So don't plan on doing a lot of running until you get used to it. So I thought it's interesting how I'm looking forward to the conference and they're trying to tell me behave yourself. But it's all good.
Yes, I lived there for 2 years in the Colorado area. It is very dry. Your throat will get scratchy if you don't drink a lot of water, but dehydration is a big issue, especially in the team pro sports out there that play outdoors. And so they always do that as part of their protocols when they come to Denver.
We have a wonderful 2-day program put together. It is going to be a lot of fun. If you are a horticulturist, you will have a wonderful time.
And again, if anyone has questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us as, regional vice chairs, to Ginny as our chair. Again, we just wanted to kind of do a quick breakdown overview. I hope that you found it useful and helpful. And if you're working on this and need feedback, please let us know. Andy, Ginny, anything else?
I think you did a good job covering it. So good job.
Thanks.
Yes. I think you were very clear and concise. I think you followed all the right things. I think that you actually gave this, like you presented how you should write something. You very, very clear and concise.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. Any of our participants have questions? It's a quiet group out there. I've never met a group of NACA folks this quiet, Tyrone.
Yeah. Well, you might get some questions from the recording whenever they may be contacting you as well once they see it on YouTube as well.
All right. I will stop screen sharing.
I do not see any questions in the chat, and so I'd like to thank the Horticulture Committee for this presentation. And definitely this will conclude, but definitely you will have Heather and Jenny's contact information as well as the rest of the committee members if you need to get in touch with me, have any questions. But thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you at the next NACA 365.
Thanks, Tyrone. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you for support.
Thanks, everyone.